So thanks to everyone for staying up so late. And so we are very, very happy to have Jacob Steinhardt as our speaker today. Jacob started as a mathematician, I guess, in high school. You had a paper in the senior science competition on the Kelly graphs of the permutation group, but then he has drifted into machine learning and now also secure and robust machine learning system. He was a student at MIT as an undergrad and finishing up his PhD now at Stanford. He's won a number of awards, including the Hertz Fellowship, and he co-founded a summer program for gifted high school students and the Stanford AI Salon. So I guess machine learning is becoming much going out into the wild and presented with inputs it wasn't trained on and making decisions with lots of consequences, and we need something robust and secure, and glad we have someone like Jacob on our side.
Thank you very much, Buzz. So as Buzz said, thank you all for either staying up late or getting up early. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge my collaborators, Moses Karakar, Pongwei-So, Provably, Christian Ding, Eddie Yorganathan, Gregory Bailey. They're all a huge help throughout all of the work I'm going to be presenting, and most of it wouldn't have been done without them. So today I'm going to talk to you about Provably secure machine learning. But before I dive into that, I want to tell you two stories. So the first story is about Twitter. On April 23rd, 2013, Syrian hackers compromised the Associated Press Twitter feed. They put out the following tweet. It reads, "Breaking: 2 explosions in the White House and Barack Obama is injured." This, of course, didn't actually happen, but what happened to the stock market was this: over the next 3 minutes, there was a $136 billion drop, and this was caused in part due to analytics software and other statistical algorithms being fooled by this tweet. This isn't the only time that Twitter has been attacked. Perhaps more famously, during recent elections, such as the US and French elections, bots have taken to Twitter to try to influence public sentiment. And one of the things they do is they create fake tweets to try to fool Twitter's algorithms into thinking that certain topics are trending, and therefore cause legitimate Twitter users to see things that they wouldn't otherwise. And in both of these cases, the key thing is that it's not traditional software that's being attacked, it's actually the statistical algorithms that are being used. So this is the first story. And the second story is a story about computer vision. So over the last 6 or 7 years, largely driven by advances in deep learning, open domain algorithm recognition has improved substantially, to the extent that there's even papers that say that they've exceeded human level performance. However, as soon as you add an adversary into this picture, the accuracy drops to essentially 0%. And in fact, it's not just that we've been overfitting, it's actually just been 0% the entire time. So to understand what's going on here, we need to look at a phenomenon called adversarial images discovered by Zhengyi and collaborators in 2014. And the idea here is that I can take any image, in this case an image of a panda, that's correctly classified by a state-of-the-art computer vision system, add some small imperceptible perturbation, and cause the system to misclassify it, again, essentially arbitrarily, with high confidence. In this case, it thinks that the panda is a given, and in fact, this perturbation is so small that these two images are the same on this particular screen. Now, this goes beyond changing pandas to givens. It's been shown that you can put stickers on stop signs that sort of look like graffiti, but cause image classifiers to think that they're yield signs. You can create imperceptible audio commands that sound like noise to humans, but are interpreted as commands by your smartphone. And in malware, attackers can manipulate non-functional parts of their code to evade detection by virus detectors and other systems. And so what's going on here? It's not that the people designing these systems don't know what they're doing, it's that there's a very fundamental issue with the way machine learning works, which is that essentially all machine learning systems assume either implicitly or explicitly the trained distribution, the distribution that we collect data from to build our system, is somehow related to the test distribution, the system that we deploy on. And an attacker is free to just do something that's very different from what's seen in training, and therefore create vulnerabilities that they can then exploit by subverting this assumption. So beyond these evasion attacks at test time, another vulnerability of machine learning systems comes through the data itself. So all of machine learning relies on having some data, and often this data is actually collected from users of whatever system is being built. And so an attacker, simply by creating fake accounts, can add fake data that they have control over to the system. So this phenomenon is called data poisoning. It's perhaps most famously affected Amazon, who has to deal with fake reviews, more generally other recommendatory systems such as deal to Netflix, and even more generally any time that you're collecting data in a crowdsourced manner. And perhaps more subtly, it also shows up in malware and spam detection, because the detectors for malware and spam are often built by looking at previous malware and spam, and therefore there's a backdoor where the attacker is actually supplying the data used by the system, and there's a line of work showing that this can actually be exploited. So if we wanted to deal with these sorts of vulnerabilities, what might we do? Well, one natural strategy is to try to design as many attacks as we ourselves can think of, and if a system is secure against every attack that we can think of, maybe we would be tempted to label it as actually secure. But there's an issue with this, which is that an attacker has a very strong incentive to think of whatever you didn't think of, right? And this has actually played out in the literature on these adversarial images since their discovery in 2014. There's been a number of fixes proposed to try to avoid this vulnerability, but eventually these fixes were all sort of found to still be vulnerable. And this actually went on for quite a while. So actually over the past 3 years, there's been at least 100, I think several hundred papers published on this single topic. And essentially it's the case that the attacker pretty much always wins. So usually, within a few months of a defense being proposed, it's been broken. In fact, at the most recent machine learning conference, 7 of the either 8 or 11, depending on how you count, proposed defenses were broken before peer review even ended. And this is actually only counting the papers that were eventually accepted. So this brings us to a key point, which is that if we just rely on this empirical evaluation, we're going to end up in an arms race with an attacker where we always need to be more clever than the attacker. And this puts defense at a large disadvantage. You end up in this arms race that you're often going to lose. And this goes beyond this literature on adversarial images. A similar story has played out in the academic literature on malware, and it also plays out behind closed doors at most large tech companies. So the perspective we're going to take in this talk is that to avoid this arms race, we really need to do something fundamentally different. So what we need to do is we need to first define some formal threat model laying out the capabilities that an attacker has, and defining some comprehensive family of potential attacks that our system could be subjected to. And then we want to design algorithms that have provable security under this threat model. So while this is perhaps a strange thing to do in machine learning, this is actually a very common thing to do in traditional security, and would perhaps even be the first instinct of a traditional computer security researcher, but it's difficult in machine learning for a number of reasons. One is that the attack surface is just very broad. There's just many ways that an attacker can interact with the system. The other is that often it's unclear what you even want to be establishing, what property you want your system to have. If you have a self-driving car and you want to say that an attacker can't cause it to crash, you need to somehow formally define what it means for a car to crash so you can actually put it into math. So despite these difficulties in this talk, we will see that it is possible to get meaningful proofs of security under 2 different threat models. And these threat models are going to correspond to these data poisoning and test time attacks that we saw before. So to outline the rest of this talk, we'll consider the following schematic of a machine learning pipeline. So let's imagine that we wanted to build some spam classifier. What might we do? Well, first we would collect training data. We would get emails from users and label them as spam or non-spam. Then we would train a model. So we would try to somehow find some model that can separate the spam and the non-spam app. And then finally, we would deploy this model on new incoming test data, these green images here. This is an extra really good contrast. So sometimes the green is the blue kind of look. Okay. So what's the outline for this talk going to be? So it's going to correspond to, as we said, first this issue of adding fake training data, so data poisoning, where an attacker can add fake emails. And then secondly, this issue of manipulated test data, where an attacker might take an email they wanted to send, maybe change it in ways that don't matter to them, but that fool the spam detector. So the first two parts of the talk are going to be on this training data issue, and the last part is going to be on test data. These are sort of going to be in the tradition of robust statistics and robust optimization, respectively. So let's dive right in and start with data poisoning, and in particular, we'll try to understand what optimal data poisoning attacks look like. So recall this is where an attacker adds fake data to manipulate a learning model. This might be the model you end up with if you only have clean data, as in here. But if you add in fake data, then the model might change, perhaps substantially, and you might even cause legitimate data to be misclassified. And so we said that we want to define a formal attack model. So how might we formalize this? Well, this is the model that we sort of think is motivated by practice, which is we say that we're sort of given endpoints of clean data, and then an adversary is allowed to add some small fraction of additional poison points, and they can add these however they want. And the sort of motivation for this is twofold. So first of all, this parameter epsilon is sort of controlling how much power the attacker has. We're sort of imagining that this fake data is coming from perhaps creating fake accounts or in some other way, maybe buying a self-driving car and uploading fake, video, and this sort of controls how much of the total data they're going to control. And we're only allowing additions because it's sort of easy to imagine how you would add data, but it's hard to imagine how you might delete data that's already in the system without having already compromised it in some more severe ways, such as gaining password access to the system. So this is similar to a traditional model in statistics called heuristic determination model, but we're only allowing these additions, and this is actually going to be important later on. So let's try to understand what happens under this model. So if we sort of do things in maybe the usual way and aren't too careful, what would we do? We would just sort of minimize the overall error according to some metric of error on the overall data set, the clean data together with the poison data. But the problem is that the adversary can kind of just, even with a single data point, play some extreme outlier and cause the model to move arbitrarily far. So we don't want this. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add in some form of outlier detection. So we're going to remove suspicious looking points, and then unless the adversary sort of plays a point that's not going to get removed, they're not going to do anything. And so we're going to call the set of points that the outlier detector doesn't remove the feasible set, because it's sort of the points that the attacker can play in without just having no effect. And here I'm only showing the feasible set for the positive class, just to avoid cluttering the slides, but there would also be another feasible set for the spam class as well. Okay, so now we're doing outlier removal, and we're hoping that this is going to help, but an important question is this actually going to help? We've at least removed this sort of trivial strategy where a single outlier can cause arbitrary damage, but is the outlier detector good enough that an adversary can actually add some small constant fraction of data? So we can formalize this by saying, given the clean data together with the description of the feasible set, what is the worst case error that an attacker can induce with an epsilon fraction of data? And note that here I need to know the clean data, so this isn't something you would use at deployment time. In fact, at deployment time, either you have an accurate model or you don't. But you can use this if you're developing new methods and you want to understand, is this method likely to be secure in the presence of an attack? You take situations where you do know the ground truth, and then you can answer this question, then we can sort of simulate what the worst case attack would be. And we can formalize this mathematically by saying that we want to maximize over all choices of the poison data that lie within our feasible set, the error on the clean data, with respect to whatever parameters minimize the overall error on all of the data. And this type of optimization problem actually has a name. It's called the bi-level optimization problem, coming from the fact that there's sort of two levels. There's this, max level where you're sort of trying to maximize an objective, but the max term depends on some secondary second level optimization problem that's defining the pressure state max. So, it's just an optimization problem, so we could just try to solve it. Unfortunately, it turns out that bi-level optimization in the fully general case is actually quite hard. In fact, even if someone told you what the answer was, it would already be NP hard just to verify that what they told you was true. So, and this is also sort of true in practice, it's quite difficult to solve this except in very special cases. So we can't really just try to solve this as a bi-level problem in a black box way. So another place we might turn is to the rich literature on robust statistics, which tries to understand, how methods behave in the presence of outliers. And there is this tool called influence functions, which tries to measure this, but it unfortunately assumes that the fraction of outliers is negligible, and both in theory and empirically doesn't really work once we go to negligible fraction of outliers. So finally, we might be tempted to just design a bunch of attacks and test empirically, but this is heuristic and could be far from the worst case attack, and as we saw earlier, this leads us to this arms race scenario, which we want to avoid. So this brings us to our contribution, which was to upper bound this bi-level problem by a convex min-max problem, which can be solved very efficiently. And since we have this upper bound, this allows us to actually obtain certificates of robustness against all attacks if this upper bound is good. And conversely, we'll actually see that when the upper bound is not good, when we don't get the certificate, we actually get a candidate attack that often gives us very strong attacks. So let's understand what's going on here with this min-max problem. So recall our goal is to somehow bound the worst case attack, which corresponded to this bi-level optimization problem. We're trying to maximize the error of the learned parameters. And the intuition is that if the attacker is going to do a lot of damage, then they better be able to at least find some point that has large error under the true model parameters. Because if they can't find any points that have large error, then with a small fraction of data, they're not really going to be able to move the model around by very much. And we can actually formalize this via the following analytical device of what we call a super attacker, where we take this problem and we make the adversary's life easier. So instead of only giving them credit for creating error on the clean data, they'll also get credit even if they cause error on the points that they themselves added. So this is only going to increase the error, but the key thing is now that the thing that the attacker is maximizing is the same thing as what the learner is minimizing, and you end up with a min-max problem, which turns out to be much easier to solve. So this min-max problem, what it is formally is the min term corresponds to the learner who's trying to fit all of the points, and the max term corresponds to this adversary, which is trying to find points that are hard to fit. Yes?
Does this assume that it's convex when it's linear? It's a linear convex?
You need to. This is not making any assumptions yet, but if I want to be able to do this, to solve this efficiently, I'm going to need to have some oracle for so the oracle I need is at a given set of model parameters, I need to be able to find the worst fit point. And so if it's linear, then often you'll be able to do this, although it also depends on the structure of a feasible set. If it's not linear, then things might be dicier. Any other questions? Okay. So let's look at what algorithm you actually get out of this. It actually is fairly simple. So here now I'm actually showing both feasible sets. So here's the feasible set for the negative, and here's the positive. And what are we going to do? We're going to start with just the model on the clean data, and then we're going to find the point with highest error. And we're going to, that's the start point here, and we're going to incrementally update the model parameters towards this point. And then we're just going to repeat this. We're going to keep finding the new highest error point and keep updating the model parameters. And at the end, one of two things is going to happen. Either these final model parameters are going to successfully have low average error over both the original blue points and these average red points, or they're going to have high error, in which case these red points, these are actually data points, and they're all feasible points, so you could actually consider them as an attack, and this attack will turn out to actually be strong in a sense that we can formalize. So how do we actually formalize this? So let's let theta star be the parameters that we actually ended up with after this procedure, and let's let x star be the set of red points that we generated. So the first theorem, which is the upper bound, is that the error against any attack is at most this quantity E star, which is the average error on the clean data, plus epsilon times the error against the final attack area. And then the lower bound, which is actually just a form of duality, for those of you who like duality, says that the attack x star nearly matches this bound. So the error against if you use x star as your attack, is at least E star minus some quantity that goes to 0 as that goes to infinity. And the only catch is that this error is with respect to the super attacker that we define. So the only problem we might run into is if you have too high of error on the poison data, this might not be good, but often you can deal with it. And the other sort of caveat is that I've only told you, this has all been on the training set, and of course what we care about is generalization to the test set, but you can actually bound the test error under sort of standard IID assumptions using a uniform empirical system. So that's the theory. Let's look at what this actually does empirically. So we implemented this on the Enron spam data set. This is a data set that was released into the public during the Enron lawsuits. So these are actually emails from Enron executives. It's about 70% legitimate emails, 30% spam emails. There's about 4,000 emails total. And we're going to train a support vector machine on this. This is a standard machine learning classifier, which corresponds to an error function called the hinge loss. So I won't go into detail on that, but the machine learning people, this is what we do. And our features are what are called bad words features. So this means that we have a coordinate for every word that ever appears in any of the emails, and the value for that coordinate is just how many times that word appears in this specific email. For the outlier detector, we're going to remove points that are either far away from the mean of their corresponding class, or that aren't valid, so that don't correspond to real emails, meaning they have to have non-negative integer coordinates. So this is the feasible set. And here's what happens. So here I'm plotting both the certificate we get against the fraction of poison data that is added, and also the error that the attack that we generated actually increases. And you can see that they track each other qualitatively reasonably well, and also if you look at test error, it also sort of tracks this picture. However, you should perhaps not be so happy, because if you look at this scale, this goes from 0 to 0.03, so this is a very small fraction of the data, but these errors are actually increasing substantially. And we can see this even more clearly if instead of hinge loss, we measure in terms of just the 0-1 accuracy. So here what happens is that with even a 0.5% fraction of poison data, you go from 2.5% error in the absence of an attack all the way up to 13.7% error with just this much data, which is actually only 20 points in total. And this isn't just that this particular attack, or sorry, this particular defense was a bad defense. In fact, the same attack evades many common detection algorithms. And this turns out to be a sort of fundamental aspect of the fact that this data set is just very high dimensional. So to summarize this section, we've seen that once we have a formal parent model, we can actually reduce these security problems to questions of optimization and generalization. We got a certificate by analyzing the super attacker that had more power than the actual attacker, and then via duality, we actually got a strong attack. Unfortunately, the attacker is winning in high dimension, and so this brings us to the next part of the talk, where we'll ask, can we design learning algorithms that are actually robust in high dimensions? So we're still at training data, but now we're just going to measure the dimension being much higher. So I'm also going to change the formal setting a little bit, just to abstract away from this classification problem that we were considering before. So now we're going to just assume that we observe n points. We'll call them x1 through xn. 1 minus epsilon n of them come from some distribution of interest that we care about, and the remaining epsilon n are arbitrary outliers that are controlled by an adversary. And our goal is to estimate some parameter of this distribution G star. Before it was some linear separator for the data, but more generally it could be the mean, it could be the best fit line for regression, it could be some ranking for a recommender system. But for this part of the talk, we're going to focus on the problem of mean estimation, although our results hold more generally. So here we're given n data points in some d-dimensional space, 1 minus epsilon n of them come from the distribution we care about, and we want to estimate the mean. In one dimension, this is a fairly well understood problem where the true mean could be heavily skewed by outliers, the empirical mean could be heavily skewed from the true mean due to outliers, and you might use more robust estimates such as the median or the trimmed mean. And it's tempting to try to generalize this to higher dimensions, where you sort of just throw away points that are far away and take the mean of the remainder as we did before. But it turns out that in high dimensions, is actually this and a large amount of natural strategies run into an obstacle where you'll actually end up with an error that grows with the dimension if you do this. And you get error roughly square root of t, which is enough to make most results accurate. So let's drill into this and understand what's going on. So let's consider just the simplest scenario perhaps, where the true data comes from a Gaussian with some unknown mean mu and independent variance 1 in every coordinate. So what's going to happen here, the issue is that almost all of the points are actually going to be quite far away from the mean. And this is just because there's variance 1 in each coordinate, and so when you add up the coordinates, the L2 distance from the mean is going to be roughly square root of d. And so an attacker can add points that aren't any further from the mean than any of the good points, and nevertheless still shift the true mean by quite a bit. And in fact, it's even worse than that. Right, the true probability, like the probability under the true distribution of these points is the same as all the good points. So they don't even have any lower probability. And so in fact, there's no filter that can filter these point-wise, not just looking at them one by one, and achieve low error. So this is an important point, which is that if you just remove these outliers independently, if you just look for suspicious looking points in high dimensions, you're fundamentally not going to be able to avoid high error, despite the fact that in practice, this is often exactly what people do. They try to find suspicious looking points to remove them from the data. So this cannot work, and we actually need to do something more subtle where we're going to look at influence at a population level to try to detect and remove outliers. And perhaps because of this, actually, this problem of high-dimensional robust optimization, despite long-standing interest, has only seen progress quite recently. So even though since around 1960 people have been interested in it, it's only in the last couple of years that there's been efficient, robust algorithms in high dimensions. And in this part of the talk, I'm going to discuss our contribution to this literature, where we both showed how to develop estimators for a large class of learning problems and also tolerate a larger fraction of outliers than was previously thought possible by introducing a new model of learning. And this is based on a series of papers with combinations of Moses Charikar, Professor Thar, and Gregory Daly. So let me first go over our high-level approach. It's based on taking this mean estimation problem and actually turning it into a matrix decoding problem. Now this might seem a bit odd because taking the mean of a data set is a very simple, easy operation, and denoising a matrix is much more complicated, but it turns out to be a fruitful lens in this robust setting. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our data, we're going to stack it into a matrix, and we're going to think of this matrix as a noisy version of this rank 1 matrix, which is just the true mean repeated over and over again. And since this matrix has rank 1, we could perhaps try to denoise it by minimizing an objective that trades off between the squared reconstruction error and some convex relaxation of the rank of the matrix. However, the problem is that in the presence of adversaries, we're not going to get this. We're probably going to get something like this instead, where we have a bunch of copies of the mean of the bad data. In fact, it's even going to be worse than this. We're just going to get all sorts of linear combinations of the good and bad data, and it's not going to be clear how to actually recover the true mean. But the key insight is that if you do end up in this situation with these additional components of variation beyond the one that you want, it must be the case that there's some small number of points, the bad points, that are responsible for these additional degrees of variation, and so they must be exerting high influence on the recovered matrix X bar. And you can actually detect this by looking at the dual of this problem, where this influence actually decomposes additively under the dual, and you'll be able to actually assign blame to individual points that have the high influence. And so this allows you to detect the outliers and remove them. And so it's either always the case that the attacker, that the outliers don't have high influence on the length parameters, in which case you're happy, your solution looks like this, or they do have high influence, in which case you'll be able to do something about it, and then remove the outliers and try again. So if you actually sort of push this through, we get the following result for mean estimation. So again, recall for mean estimation, we have these n data points, and we want to estimate their mean. What we can show is that if the fraction of outliers is at most 1/8, and the true distribution has bounded variance, then we'll be able to recover a parameter mu hat, the bound on the variance, times square root of epsilon, the fraction of poison points. And the key thing here is that the error does not depend on p. Right? Before there was going to be a square root of p in here somewhere, and I've gotten rid of that, and this is essentially the difference between more or less accurate results and actually meaningful results. And it's even better than this. So we can actually even do away with this assumption on the fraction of outliers entirely, and get an error that depends now on sigma over the square root of 1 minus epsilon. So this is bounded as long as epsilon is bounded away from 1. But now I'm actually handling a majority of outliers, and so I'm going to need to change the model slightly, and I'll describe this model in more detail in the next slide. But the key thing here is that we can actually handle the majority of bad data. And this should perhaps be surprising because you might be thinking of the following image where, if 2/3 of the data are outliers, I could end up with 3 clusters, 2 of them are the bad data, 1 is the good data, and they all look identical. I don't really know which is which, and so I'm not going to be able to get any sort of good estimate of the true mean. But the key point is that if I know that the variance of the true data is smaller than the distance between these clusters, then I actually have quite a bit of information. So initially I didn't, it looked like I didn't know anything, but actually I know that the mean is pretty close to one of these 3 means. And so this is going to let us narrow things down to 3 possibilities. And if I see even a few samples that I know are the true samples, then I actually can make progress. If I saw even a few samples from this blue cluster and you told me that that data was real, then I know that the mean is pretty close to the mean of the blue cluster. And this motivated us to define what we call the semi-verified learning model, where we observe some constant number of verified points for the true distribution. So this is what lets us handle the majority of outliers. And this actually had a pretty interesting implication beyond these security settings. It actually allowed us to make progress on a problem in unsupervised learning, which is a problem of learning mixtures of distributions. And this is because if we sort of have a mixture of distributions, we can think of one mixture component as the good data, and the remaining components as the arbitrary data, and so actually learn about one component independently of the other components. And this is interesting because in general this problem of learning mixtures is actually NP hard, even though in practice people solve it all the time. And so there's been a literature in the theory community trying to understand what assumptions actually let you solve these mixture modeling problems which underlie many problems in learning, such as clustering. So there's a classical result due to Impala and Wayne. Well, I don't know if I should say classical. It's from 2002. You can decide if that's classical or not. But it's by Impala and Wayne, showing that if each of these mixture components is separated by at least k to the 1/4, so by at least the 4th root of the number of clusters, then there is an efficient algorithm for disentangling them and learning about each one, assuming that each component is drawn from a Gaussian distribution. And for the experts in the room, there's also an approach to this based on tensor methods, although there's actually a catch to this, which I'm happy to discuss offline. So also, in general, Gaussian might be a strong assumption, so there was another line of work showing that under just bounded second moments, you can also do this, but you have to assume that the separation is a bit larger now, the square root of the number of components. And if you just apply results in a black box, you actually recover the same result. So we can cluster with separation square root of k under bounded second moments, and moreover, we get a method that's actually robust to outliers, essentially for free. So this already shows that this robust learning model actually provides a useful lens on this mixture problem. But it turns out to be even better. So if you push the techniques further using sum of squares method, you can actually bring the square root of k all the way down to essentially no dependence on k whatsoever. Under an assumption that's stronger than second moment but weaker than Gaussian, which is called the Poincare assumption, which I'm also happy to discuss offline what exactly that means. But the key point is that we've actually improved on this 15-year-old bound along all three dimensions under its weaker assumptions, weaker separation, and weaker robustness. So these techniques also apply beyond mean estimation, as I mentioned before. We've also applied them to problems such as crowdsourcing, community detection, estimating item frequencies, and more generally, convex optimization. So to summarize this section of the talk, we first of all saw that outlier removal fails in a fairly fundamental way in high dimensions, but that we can still get robust algorithms via looking at things at the population level. We introduced this new model that handles the majority of outliers, and we've seen that the lens of robustness can actually help improve on long-standing bounds in other areas of learning. So now we've spent most of this talk,
Did you apply the new model to the Enron data from the first section?
Yes. So I didn't show that because we finished that paper about 3 days ago. So it didn't quite make it into these slides. But yeah, the error. Let's see, what was it? Before, I think the error at 1% poisoning data is about 5.5%. It was around like 17 or 18% before. So you get a substantial reduction. This is over the baseline of about 2.5 to 3% if not accurate. So you do much better. Good question. Thank you. Cool. Any other questions? Great. Okay. So in the final part of the talk, we're going to move from training time to test time. In particular, we're going to revisit these adversarial images. So recall these are these images that look innocuous but get misclassified by state-of-the-art computer vision systems such as neural networks. And I think even beyond security, you should be sort of dissatisfied with this because it really shows that these neural networks are not learning the right thing. I think anything that thinks this is a given has a pretty deep underlying flaw. That's my opinion. We can fight about it maybe during the questions. And these aren't kind of just a kind of trivial thing. They actually persist despite a lot of attempts to deal with them. In fact, you can even construct them in the physical world. So we've already seen this stop sign yield sign. You can also, there are some undergrads at MIT that created a 3D printed turtle that is misclassified as a rifle. And people from Google showed that you can print out these stickers that you would put them on anything and they make it look like a turtle. Yeah. So there's a lot of creative work on this. There's even a cattle competition hosted by Google Brain where about 100 teams competed in attack and defense. We competed in both and did fairly well in both, but we found that attack was really much easier than defense. In fact, the top attacks beat essentially all of the defenses in a completely black box manner. So this kind of underscores this arms race that we saw earlier, and in this final part of the talk, I want to discuss our contribution to trying to help end this arms race by creating a provably secure neural network on the MNIST data set. So this is joint work with the DB running Alcon and Tracy Link. So to say provably robust, I need to say what assumptions we're making. So the third model we're going to consider is what's called the L-infinity attacker model, where an adversary given a clean input is allowed to change each pixel in the image, but it can only change each pixel by at most epsilon. And we're calling this is called the L-infinity model because we're essentially allowing the image to be perturbed in the L-infinity form. And so pictorially, you can think of it like so. There's some classifier, in this case a neural net, that has some decision boundary. This point here is robust because everything in the L-infinity all around it is classified correctly, whereas this point here is not robust, it's attackable because there's this region which has a different class. And this is exactly what's happening in these adversarial images that we saw before. Now, this L-infinity model is not completely realistic. There's many attacks that you could imagine that don't fall into this model. But we chose it because actually most of this arms race that I showed you before is already happening under this L-infinity model as was the cattle competition, so it seems to be quite difficult to defend even under this model. So our goal is going to be to train a classifier that's provably robust under this L-infinity attacker. Now, you should perhaps expect this to be hard because formal verification, which is essentially what we're trying to do here, is more difficult even for traditional software, which is usually designed with some purpose in mind. And so it seems like for ML systems it should be even harder because it's just kind of this mess of nodes and weights that didn't really have any design, it was just learning from data. But it's going to turn out that actually learning is going to help us. So our strategy is going to be to first formulate some general verification method. And this method is actually going to be essentially vacuous on arbitrary neural networks. But there's going to be a rich subfamily of neural networks where the bound is actually quite tight. So even though our strategy doesn't help on arbitrary network, if we're learning the network, then we can actually make progress because we can bias learning towards networks where the bound actually works. So this I think is an important point, which is that rather than fighting each other, learning and verification can actually work hand in hand, and learning has the potential to make verification easier rather than harder. So how are we going to actually do this? Recall, our goal is to train a classifier that's robust in some neighborhood of the data, where here we're not robust, and we'd like to fix that. And this is actually, in some sense, a problem in robust optimization. And the standard thing you would do in robust optimization is you would define a robust error function, which is just the maximum of your usual error function, overall perturbations that you want to be robust to, and then minimize this. The problem is that for neural networks, which is what these vision systems are built on, this maximization term is highly non-convex, and geometrically the issue is it's hard to tell if we have some really high-dimensional L-infinity ball whether it's actually contained within one side of this surface. So we need to somehow deal with this non-convexity. And so a first pass you might do is look at the gradient of your model. So these machine learning models aren't actually just a binary decision boundary. They come from some real value function that we look at the positive or negative. This is where the function is positive, this is where it's negative. And so if at some point the gradient is small relative to the distance to the boundary, then we might be tempted to say that we're going to be robust. The problem is that you could have sharp curvature potentially, and there could be some other direction where it's perhaps almost orthogonal to the gradient, but where we're much closer to the boundary. And in fact, this is what happens. So if you try to train a network to have small gradient, then you'll end up with a phenomenon called gradient masking, where the gradient is very small at your training points. In fact, it's also small at your test points, so it generalizes. But there's places nearby every training point and every test point that have very large gradients. And so you don't actually end up with robustness. We need to do something more difficult where we get a uniform bound on the gradient over this entire L-infinity ball that we want robustness for. So to do this, we're actually going to need to open up the hood on the network. So I'm going to gloss over this a bit because I'm a bit short on time, but it turns out that for two-layer networks at the very least, the gradient only depends on which units are active. And you actually end up with a graph theoretic problem that turns out to be very similar to the weighted max cut problem. And while that problem is NP hard, there's convex relaxations of it that can be solved in polynomial time and work quite well. And so if we push everything through those convex relaxations, we actually get an upper bound on the robust error, and we can minimize this bound to obtain a robust network. And for those of you who are really in optimization, you wouldn't want to do this directly because then you have to solve this every program every single time, and that's quite slow. But if you instead minimize the bool, you end up with a faster algorithm. So let's look at the results. We implemented this on the MNIST dataset, which is a dataset for recognizing handwritten digits. And we considered two different ways of training a network. The first is normal training, where you optimize your network against some known attack. So this is you sort of know what attack you want to be robust against in advance, and you're just trying to optimize your network to do well against that specific attack or attack strategy. And then we considered our method where we're just minimizing this upper bound on the robust error. So first we can look at the error of the method that was optimized against a single attack against the attack it was optimized for. So this is sort of an oracle that knows what it has to deal with in advance, and this is what we get here. But the degree of provable robustness of this is very poor. So it's possible this network is robust, but at least we're not going to be able to prove anything about it, and this corresponds to the fact that our bounds are vacuous in general. But if we just minimize our upper bound, we first of all get a network that's almost as robust against a specific attack as a network that knew that the attack was coming. And we get a reasonably good degree of provable robustness. So the picture has gone from here, where we kind of have these vulnerable points, to here. And so we see that minimizing even this loose bound can actually lead to both empirical and provable robustness. So now we've seen both the training and test time section, and I just want to end briefly with a few takeaways. So first of all, in general, we've seen, first of all, that empirical evaluation isn't enough, and we actually want some underlying theory. And also that threat models can turn what were originally security problems into optimization problems. For data poisoning, we saw that removing outliers is actually the wrong goal, and we should look at things at the population level. And also that the lens of robustness can be useful for other learning problems as well. And then finally, for adversarial images, we saw the learning rate verification here. Beyond security, I'm sort of interested more generally in thinking of machine learning systems as software systems and trying to give them the reliability properties that we want software to have. So security is, of course, one reliability property you would want, but there's others as well. One thing you would want is systems that can actually detect failures rather than failing silently, as ML systems often do. This has led us to a line of work on robust approximate inference. And you also want them to behave predictably in new situations, whereas machine learning often in a new situation will kind of just fall over. And so one way we try to explore this is by trying to guarantee good performance for some family of counterfactual input distributions, which has led us to think about causal inference. And in both of these cases, an important theme is that you can't rely just on empirical performance to guarantee success, because you somehow need to actually move some of the way through the data to get the robust experience. In the future, a problem that I'm quite interested in is moving beyond machine learning as software. You can also think of humans as part of this overall software system, where there's this kind of neglected part of machine learning, which is how do you actually get the data. We often just have it on our hard drive, so it's actually collected by people at some point. And this process is, of course, error prone. And there's many ways we want to be robust. Maybe the easiest one is you might have unreliable labelers, and this kind of fits fairly squarely into the robust learning problems we've been discussing in this talk. But there's much harder things as well. So in robotics, you often learn from demonstrations, and these demonstrations, it's not that some small fraction of them are wrong. It's that every single one of them is wrong in some sense, because the person is, kind of doing all sorts of weird things that don't quite fit in with the actuators and natural mechanics of the robot. So it would be good to have some way of kind of correcting for that. And maybe the hardest one is what I call proxy signals. So if you're some web company and you have users, you might want to make your users happy, but you don't know if they're happy, you only know what they click on. And so you build a system that's very good at getting them to click on things, but maybe not so good at making them happy. And I think that this underscores really an important problem, which is that ML is very good at optimizing things. But it's good at optimizing things that we can see, and we can't always see what we really want to optimize. So it's important to develop methods to ensure that we're actually optimizing right. So I'll end by thanking my collaborators once again and take questions.
Are models that converge to flat minima more robust to adversarial examples?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Are models that converge to flat minima more robust to adversarial examples?
That's a good question. So at training time, I think they're less robust because it's sort of easier for a single data point to perturb you. At test time, that's a good question. I don't know. I could see intuition for why that might be true, but I don't know of any formal connections there.
I wanted to piggyback on the question you got earlier, which is like, I told this back in the answer. So you described this influence idea in the second part of your talk. You were trying to somehow identify the training base for you.
Yeah.
And I think that wouldn't work for classification settings, but you said you've got it still coming on. So just wanted to invite you to expand on how you generalize that influence with a classification setting.
Right. So the basic idea is if you train your model and you look at the parameters you end up with, you kind of want it to be the case that the attacker didn't have a lot of components with the model. And so what's one way of looking at that? Well, if I look at the gradients of each of my data points at the optimum, I kind of don't want it to be the case that the outliers are all very systematically and strongly pointing in some direction that's kind of disagreeing with the grid data. So one way I can do that is I can actually just take the singularity composition of all of my gradients. And then if the adversary is perturbing things too much, then they're going to stick out to you. Now, to actually formalize this, you need to make all sorts of distributional assumptions on your data that may or may not be true for Enron, but empirically it at least does seem to help.
Hey, I think I missed something about the formal verification step at the end. Was that, you were showing that for your training points, or were you somehow showing that for unsafe examples?
That was for test error. So so you're talking about this picture? Yeah, so basically so this upper bound that we get at the end of the day is actually an upper bound that you can apply to new data points as well. So it's on a new data point, you're also going to get some upper bound on the adversarial perturbation. And so the solid curves are the average over the test set of what the upper bound is able to establish.
But the optimization problem was solved on the training data.
The optimization problem is solved on the training data. Then you get some setting of the dual variables that you just keep. And then you just plug in that setting of the dual variables on the test data, so you don't need to re-optimize.
Okay.
It's actually relatively fast. It is maybe it's a bit slower than literally just evaluating on the test set. I think you might need to like compute some max eigenvalue or some matrix, but it is pretty fast.
So you just remind me, I missed it, what assumptions you need about access to clean data in the data poisoning part of the work that you talked about, and when you imagine that it's realistic to get that
Right. So part two you don't have any access to the clean data. Part one, where we were trying to evaluate robustness numerically, is when you use clean data. And so the idea there is, if imagine that I'm going to deploy this I have some spam. I want to deploy this on some actual spam. What might I do? I might collect a bunch of historical data sets where I actually know the answer. And that's the question: if an adversary had been adding data to this data set, would my method have performed well? And then if it performs well on all of these spam programs where we know the truth, then we might hope that it will work well on deployment, although that is, of course, an active faith. It's in some sense the same active faith we perform when we have an image classifier that works well on ImageNet, and I hope that it will actually work well in the wild. And so the thing we're trying to remove is the adversary part, where there's this additional question of what the adversary is.
All right, let's take a look at that.